Oh, wait, hold on. Sorry, this is gonna be a little bit discombobulating. There we go. That's much better. Okay, okay, okay. I had to flip around the scenes a little bit, so that my timer would reset without me having to like go in and do it manually, which would almost certainly cause more problems than it solves. But we're gonna get back into the live stream. So far my bit rate is cruising along okay. There's actually one thing that I wanted to do on stream before I get started. Maybe you can see this. Check that out. I got my ballot today and I voted. So here we go. Just put it right there. All right, awesome. Little nice upside down I voted sticker on my forehead, right where it belongs. Yeah. Do something like that. Okay, cool. Now I'll put my headset back on. I'm gonna check the Discord to see if there was an update. I don't think there was. Yeah, no, we're good. We're good. Launch. I'm gonna refresh Twitch. Oh no, I'm dropping frames again. Son of a. Let me go into the settings and enable something. Where is let's adjust this down to 4500. Apply. All right, cool. Then where is dynamic bitrate? Twitch auto. Give me 1 second, guys. Audio video? No, that wouldn't be it. Perhaps advanced? Maybe not. Here, hold on. Let me actually look this up. OBS dynamic bitrate? Settings advanced network. Oh, okay. Oh, dang it. It's not something I can just enable on the fly, huh? I would have to cut the stream momentarily and then come back and re-enable it. Why is this happening? Why do I drop frames like this? I don't understand. Let me refresh the page. Okay. It's fluctuating a little bit less now. Okay. Hopefully, since I have it set to 4500 kilobits per second. Here, hold on. Let me look something up. Recommended bit rate for 1080p streaming. 3500 to 6000. Okay. Standard frame rate of 30 FPS would be on the lower end. Okay, so 4500 is about right, it seems, and my bitrate is still struggling. Well, looks like this is going to be a technical difficulty stream again for a little bit. Not much I can do about this. God damn it. OBS dropping frames with good internet. I don't think this is going to net me anything better, but fucking hell. Okay, great. That was exactly as useless as I expected it to be. I guess I'll just have to deal with the frame drops for this stream. Hopefully it does not exceed the range of like 20% of my frames dropped, and hopefully my bitrate is able to keep up for the most part. Because I've already gone way more time than I wanted to without streaming. Believe me when I say that I wanted to stream, but like the bitrate issue was just fucking getting on my nerves to no end, absolutely no end. So I don't know. I might have to like dedicate a full like couple of days specifically to researching that, because okay, here's the annoying thing, right? Every post that I've seen about like, oh, why is my OBS dropping frames with a good internet connection and a strong setup? You know, there's no discernible reason that it should be dropping frames, right? Every post that I've seen says, yeah, it's your internet connection. Except the problem is it fucking isn't. Because I tested my internet connection. First, I went to the default, like, Google internet speed test, and I had, like, 50 to 60 megabits per second upload, and something like 500 megabits per second download, or something like that. I was like, okay, so that's clearly not the problem. But then, just to make doubly sure, I went to Verizon. Verizon is my internet service provider, and they have their own proprietary internet testing service. Which I figured I would use because that'd probably give a much more accurate reading if I'm on a Verizon network. And it gave me, for the whole network, it gave a rating of about 900 megabits per second, both up and down, which is the rated speed of, gigabit Ethernet, for the whole network in the house. And then for my device specifically, my computer, just that, I got 700 megabits per second I think, download, and then 400 megabits per second upload. A 6,000 bitrate on stream is 6 megabits per second. That's less than 2% of my capacity for uploads, just on this device. So it's clearly not my internet connection that's the problem. It's one of two things, right? I've isolated the potential cause of this, because my capture card has also flipped out at times, and done things that have required me to like restart it and do all sorts of funky stuff there. It's not my capture card, it's not my internet connection, it's not my PC. I've verified all three of those things with methods that I know are indicative of that. So it's either the Twitch server. I have the Twitch server connection set to auto, which I don't know why, but it's possible that OBS is connecting me to a bad, like a server with a bad connection, It's possible the Twitch server is chugging balls and OBS is connecting me to it anyway. Or alternatively, it's possible that OBS is the problem. And in fact, I think that's the most likely culprit. OBS has acted erratically before. In fact, just a few streams ago, just last stream, even the last time I was able to have a full stream, I was experiencing the issue where there was a very staticky sort of hissing noise when I used a certain noise suppression filter. And for an inexplicable reason, probably for no reason at all, that is now gone. My audio is more or less back to normal, and that's as of like 2 minutes before streaming. I tested it in just a quick, recording on OBS. So I've done my own troubleshooting insofar as I can, and it is absolutely not anything that any of the forum posts online would have me believe that it is, because couldn't possibly be the software that you use to stream, right? That couldn't possibly be it, even if that's the thing that you've isolated it to. So I think I've basically come to the conclusion the internet isn't going to be of any help to me there. Because everybody's kind of circle jerking on how they are correct, and the people experiencing the problems are wrong, actually, and have misdiagnosed the root issue. And I'll have to troubleshoot that myself. Rip, hope you get that figured out. Yeah, look, if I have my bitrate set at 4500, I experience less severe frame drops and for a lower amount of time. You probably notice I'm getting some frame drops here, but contrast to when I have my bitrate set at 6000 and drop 30% of my frames, now I have the bitrate set to about 4500 and I'm dropping about 15 to 20% of my frames, which isn't great, but that's manageable. I think the content of the stream still gets mostly delivered. Unfortunately, I forgot to check dynamic bitrate. That might be something I have to do in the meantime off stream until I get this issue fixed. Imagine the internet being helpful. Yeah, imagine in the year of our Lord 2024 when, you know, dead internet theory is real. At least the audio still goes through, though. Yeah, that's true. One thing I've found about live streaming, video drops frames. Audio does not. Audio files, very small in comparison to video files. It's way easier for information and audio to be compressed and sent as packets to a server on the internet than it is for video. Because, you know, there's a whole lot of, like, rapidly changing color data and stuff like that. I don't, like, I know enough about it to understand kind of how, like, one is larger than the other, but not really enough to explain how that works, really, you know? It's like, it's very much, it's knowledge born out of, like, trial and error, you know? But anyways, that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm not here to talk about how my stream fucking sucks lately, and Twitch sucks, and OBS sucks, and everything sucks except for me, because I'm pretty cool, and I've been doing this for 2 years. No, I'm here to talk about politics, right? And you know what that means? That means elections, because it's an even-numbered year, and it's autumn, and that's when a lot of elections happen. We tried streaming different resolutions. Not sure how much that would help. Bitrate is basically that. The capture card that I use is a 1080p 60 capture card, so it's always going to capture at that resolution. The bitrate is what affects the resolution of the stream. So 4500 is like the lower end of 1080 or potentially like 720p 60. So that's the closest I can get to really addressing that. I wouldn't even understand anyway, but I hope you can fix it. Yeah, me too. It's okay. You probably understand about as much as me. You know, if I gave you 30 minutes in like screwing around in OBS, you might basically be on the same level as me. But yeah, politics, elections even. Now, because I signed the contract to be a socialist, I'm legally obligated to mention that elections are cringe because this is a liberal democracy and whatnot. And, you know, electoralism is cringe. But elections are nonetheless important because they determine which ideological priorities will be driving the sort of neoliberal political system for the time being. Okay, if you stream as 1080, but you can rescale lower resolution for the viewers. No, that's what I mean. That's what the bitrate is. That's me rescaling the resolution down a little bit. And then the capture card is the canvas. Move on from that, though? Okay. Yeah. Elections have been happening outside of the U.S. as well as they're approaching in the U.S. Let's start with Brandenburg region in Germany. It is next to Berlin. Here, hold on. Let me look this up. Images. Where is Brandenburg? Okay, it surrounds Berlin. Great, thank you. Yeah, the state of Brandenburg in Germany recently had regional elections, you know, the state elections, where I get ads on YouTube to go vote, and I'm not American. Well, you should still vote in your country's elections, but yeah, unfortunately, you can't vote in American elections. The elections in Germany have been happening, regional elections, leading up to, I think there's going to be federal elections in Germany this fall. I think it's an election year for them as well. And I already covered how in another state, the AfD won in a pretty blowout victory, as well as the other new far-right party, the BSW, which is unfortunate, and also speaks to the sort of conditions that enable the far right to rise in the first place. Here we have an interesting momentary subversion of that sort of expectation because of the far right being on the rise. It's kind of surprising when there is a coalition formed to defeat them, especially because in Brandenburg the Social Democrats won this election in relative terms. Obviously, no single party got a majority. But the SPD, the German SPD, came in first place in the Brandenburg regional elections, and the AfD came in second, with about, what, 30%? They had like 30-something percent each. Which is, like I said, relative victory, but this is still only a forestalling of fascism. This is what I refer to when I say that, like, people, the choices people are presented with are fascism, or the circumstances which created fascism in that country, in that region, or whatever, right? So, it's kind of like, for the moment, you've dodged a bullet by not having the AfD in charge, because they are, in addition to being massively anti-immigrant and incredibly racist and basically just Nazis, complete with the Sieg Heiling and such, they are austerity liberals as well. Don't let the far-right populism fool you, anybody at home who might be watching this on Twitch or YouTube later. The far right is everything that you hate about liberals as well. The only good thing about liberals is gone when you look at the far right. The only good thing about liberals is that they're not flaming racists and homophobes, usually, right? The bad stuff, the fact that they fucking hate the left, the fact that they are pro-austerity politics, the fact that they are anti-union, anti-worker, and pro-small business and all that, all of that remains with fascists. In fact, it is worse, because fascists are more willing to abuse the system or even use it at all, because they don't have respect for democratic institutions. They will therefore use them to accomplish extremely reactionary objectives. Meanwhile, liberals, while they are anti-left, while they are anti-populist, anti-worker, etc., they have such an ideological objective to using the system in which they live, in which they operate, that their efforts to actually sabotage the labor movement are hamstrung and are much more passive. That's why in America you see, the Democratic Party is a liberal party, complete with all of the flaws that I mentioned. But because they are more passive about it, the unions are more willing to support them. They are a much weaker opposition to the left, if that makes sense. Yeah, socially progressive and fiscally conservative. That is the modern state of neoliberalism. And that is what people have picked over Nazism, because in Germany you still don't have a populist left antithesis, right? Like, people could mention Die Linke, sure, which means the left in German, but like, they're a fucking joke. They don't have a from what I understand, they're basically just slightly more to the left liberals. They're not very active, not very competent in pushing for, a sort of post-capitalist transition that a lot of 21st century left parties are very vocal about. In fact, here are the more complete results of this election. Okay, 2024 Brandenburg state election. I was wrong. It was not 30-something percent. It was 20-something. SPD came in first with 26% of the vote, 25 seats. AfD came in second with 23.5%, which amounted to 23 seats. BSW got... Oh, wait, no, actually, that's the last vote totals. Sorry, this time the SPD got 32 seats with about 31% of the vote. AfD got 30 seats with about 29% of the vote. And the BSW, with 13.5% of the vote, got 14 seats. So there are two far-right parties in this state government in Germany. And who is at the head of the government but the austerity liberals, the SPD. The left took a pretty big hit. They lost all of their seats. They have 0 seats. They only got 3% of the votes. The CDU also lost ground, as did the Greens. The CDU still has 12 seats, but now the Greens and the left are completely out of the game, as are the party that is liberal in name as well, like the FDP. So the government is exclusively the Social Democrats and then two far-right parties, and then the Christian Democrats, which is basically another far-right party. Can't wait to see the coalition government coming out of this one. It's probably, if I had to guess, it's probably going to be, if it's not a coalition of the AFD, BSW, and CDU, it's probably going to be a coalition of the SPD and the CDU, you know, which makes sense either way, because liberals love working with the far right, but liberals also love working with other liberals. So, you know, it's been known to happen. But beyond that, this does not represent, I don't want to misrepresent this. This does not in any way signal an abatement of the far right in Germany. This is a temporary, you know, forestalling. But like I said, liberals are the crisis out of which fascism is born. So obviously they're not going to be a meaningful answer to fascist, like, populist politics in any country, in Germany, in the United States, wherever else, right? You have to have that leftist antithesis that can deliver on the need for populism in the face of a highly disaffecting political and economic climate that is neoliberalism. You know, like the globalization that hollows out unions and delivers austerity politics, which makes everybody poorer except for the few fucking billionaires that are living it up at the top, right? All the stuff that you've heard from me before, and I'll say it as many times as I need to, but this, you know, this is part of a predictable pattern of events. But if that's a segment, I think that's about all I have to say on the matter. You know, things are only going to get better if there's a, like, very active leftist movement, and I mean leftist as in overtly challenging capitalism on both a social and economic level. You know, you can't do the whole, you know, limp dick SPD Greens thing where you just make your whole identity that you're not literal Nazis or that you're against, like, nuclear energy or whatever, you know. And I'm sure that, much like my last video on German elections, this is going to get plenty of attention from YouTube Nazis. But, you know, feel free to post all the comments you want, and dislike bomb the video if you want. I know you guys don't watch the full thing anyway, but, you know, that only helps me, and I don't read those comments. So, sucks to be you, I guess? I don't know. Yeah, future me, if that's a segment, cut it there. I'll deal with that in the editing. Oh boy, this track. Oop. But that's just one election. That is one election that has happened recently. There's another election that's upcoming in Canada. We love our electoral politics because it's easy content, very easy content. But you know, electoralism is still cringe, right? Canada's about to experience, I think, like, federal elections. They're about to have elections for their national government, for the parliament and whatever, and the Conservatives are projected to win in a blowout victory in, again, the same predictable pattern that we've seen from Liberal parties time and again. The only left option in Canada is the NDP. You know, the only viable left option, that is. The Liberals, again, centrists, and the reason that the right has been so successful in coming to the front in Canadian politics, much like in Germany, is because of centrism. Not only because of the circumstances that I described of you know, the boilerplate sort of alienation in a neoliberal capitalist world, but also because centrists have a very pronounced tendency to only punch left. You know, this could be, you know, it doesn't matter whether it's people that call themselves centrists, who may or may not be far right people in disguise, But this also applies to people who are, like, legitimately ideologically sitting in the center, like, that align with liberalism. You can observe the same pattern with, and at many points, the Democrats in the United States, however ineffectively they may try to punch left nowadays, or with Macron in France, albeit there with a much greater degree of effectiveness. The same thing holds true with Trudeau and the Canadian Liberal Party, which is that they despise the left. They are much more active in shutting out the left from political power than they are in combating and addressing the right. Much of Trudeau's time in office in the pandemic and afterwards has been spent shutting down strikes and preventing the labor movement from getting a hold on the ground in Canada. Basically preventing that leftist antithesis from coming about. There's an overt preference on the part of the Canadian Liberals that they would rather deal with the Conservatives in government than contend with a grassroots left-wing movement, a movement of workers and unions and like organized labor and that sort of thing. And as a result, predictably, we have a situation where the Liberals are slated to lose the election in a very large margin, and the Canadian Conservatives are going to win. I think just on their own a majority outright in the legislature. Obviously, these are all projections at this point. We don't know any of this for sure. But rest assured, if the Conservatives win, their line is virtually identical to the line of conservatives in every other country. They hate immigration, they hate gay people, they hate other queer people, they hate racial minorities, etc., etc. And they fundamentally do not differ on an ideological level from the liberals in any economic capacity, except for the part where they would kill the entire country's economy by being anti-immigration, and for the fact that they would probably somehow be even more active in shutting down labor movements and strikes. Although I will say that Canada is in a unique position where usually liberal parties are not as active as the Canadian Liberals are in shutting down the labor movement and left-wing movements. In this respect, Canadian exceptionalism is real, but it's not in the way that Canadians like to advertise it, where they pretend that they're better than America. They are actually worse than America in this way, as well as in, I think, one or two other ways that I could talk about, but that aren't directly related. And when I say they are worse than America, I mean their politics. Don't anybody get your panties in a twist or whatever, me saying that that Americans are the superior race or some shit. Oop. My mushroom. So I guess, here again, same shit, different day. Like, this is what happens when you don't have a, this is what no leftist antithesis to right-wing populism does to a motherfucker. You're just gonna keep getting Nazis over and over again in the politics of especially countries in the global north, until such time that a grassroots leftist movement is able to spring up from the ground and basically challenge both liberalism and fascism at the same time. In order to effectively challenge fascist movements, a lot of people, this is on a lot of people's minds who do not like fascism. In order to effectively challenge fascism, you also have to challenge the crisis from which it sprung. Like I said before, and like I will say again, liberalism is the crisis that produces fascism to begin with. So you have to challenge that in order to truly have a democratic society that is relatively safe from an advancing fascist movement. I always learn a lot here. I like this stream. Well, I'm glad it's educational for you. That's part of the intended purpose of this stream. But yeah, ultimately, very similar tone. I'm striking very similar tone to talking about the German elections too. In fact, I might roll this into one video. 2 elections, 1 video. Epic title. because it seems like there are certain elections, sometimes elections like this will happen or they will be upcoming, and it seems like they're a carbon copy from one country to another. Like, wow, that's crazy. You're telling me liberals have been an ineffectual leadership under a liberal system and have not meaningfully addressed any of the underlying economic inequalities or antagonisms that make people's lives super shit and make their work lives super grueling and long and grueling again, and as a result, fascists have a really easy time dripping anti-immigrant honey into people's ear because the liberals are more dedicated to shutting out the left? That's crazy. You're just telling me about this now for the first time. I'm telling you, man, every single country, it's like this. Even in the United States. To varying degrees, I would argue that the United States is one of the better off countries when it comes to the prospect of dealing with fascism, because unions have had a resurgence in the United States and Democrats have been more or less okay with that, and the standard of living in the United States is generally pretty comfortable. People don't really see not necessarily for everybody, but there isn't as much of a pronounced political bend towards fascism in terms of a mass movement. But every single country, the same few notes gets hit where globalization hollowed out the country, hollowed out the working class, and austerity politics did their part too. Unions died off for a bit, and that enabled the far right to preach a bunch of jingoistic rhetoric about nativism, protectionism, anti-immigration, and whatnot, and at times over anti-democracy, to which the liberals haven't been able to provide a coherent or compelling answer, because they are the circumstances that led to that in the first place. It would just be taking one step back. But yeah, now for real, cut the segment there. I think, if anything, if nothing else, people would do well to take that. This is part of a predictable set of political trends that we're seeing. And, it's a necessary ideological consequence of liberalism. There is an ideological progression in the world. You can call it the advancing dialectic or whatever. Ideologies will produce subsequent ideologies from them as critiques. Liberalism has produced two major subsequent ideologies out of itself, that being fascism as a reactionary answer to the failings of liberalism, and socialism as the constructive answer to the failings of liberalism. Effectively, fascism doubles down on the idealism and authoritarianism inherent to liberalism, the essentialism, the sort of mythical narratives that it has to offer, turning the latent flaws into the blatant flaws. And socialism tries to lean more into the democratic values and tendencies and anti-authoritarianism that liberalism was known for in the Enlightenment era. Now, for real, that's the segment. Cut it. You know what to do. Oh wow, those have big hitbox. This version of this track is so good. Oh my god. Almost got hit by that. Give me. So evil. I stole that man's shrooms. They remade Wii U track on Wii. I love it. Yeah, this is a really good remake. And in fact, I think it's worth mentioning that there was some trial and error that had to go into making this as well. There was an earlier version of this track in this same custom track pack, but it was a lot bumpier. You could tell, the general ideas were there, and it was pretty well polished visually speaking, but the track was a lot bumpier and, in my opinion, drove a lot worse. This shortcut at the end didn't quite function as well. It was a lot harder to land. It was, at some points, it was kind of awkwardly scaled. And I believe it, ZPL and I think maybe another author, basically either used a different version, slightly different version, or tweaked it. Basically changed the scaling and the sort of smoothness of the road. And now it drives really, really well on the Wii. It also helps that like this is a way in which Mario Kart 8 kind of failed, was that they didn't really use the anti-gravity feature to its fullest potential, I think. This track is very similar, in fact so similar to the original, that like you don't even really need to change that section with the lightning, which was originally an anti-gravity section. You know, the idea of anti-gravity was like, oh my god, you can drive at like a 90-degree angle and upside down and stuff. But for some of the tracks, it ended up just being like you kind of go at a 45-degree angle. They used anti-gravity in some places where you could have been like perfectly well suited to drive normally. And I think they kind of failed to implement that drastic change of scenery and whatever that anti-gravity inherently lent itself towards, you know. So one of the flaws of Mario Kart 8, one of the flaws of the track design that Nintendo employed in that game, became one of its biggest strengths in Mario Kart Wii, because the anti-gravity section wasn't really anti-gravity. It's really easy to just port into this game. Same thing with what is it? Sunshine Airport and Dolphin Shoals as well. They have these like short anti-gravity sections where the anti-gravity is not a necessary component of the section. You know? So I've always been pretty good at this track, and the reason for that is a little bit silly. Um, the GBA Rainbow Road is not a track that I've actually historically had a very good time with in Mario Kart Wii as a custom track, with the exception of this version, because I remember distinctly playing Mario Kart Super Circuit on the Game Boy, and I used to time trial this track specifically because you could bounce so high off of these rails, and it took a lot of track knowledge to understand and control basically the direction and height that you would get off of those like rails on the side, and to help you like not fall off and stuff, you know. And that actually kind of carried over to this Nintendo Wii port, as a custom track that, like, you know, kind of the way you're supposed to drive this track is by bouncing around off of these guardrails and stuff. As long as there's no blue shell, I'm fine. And I think even then... Alright, we're good. That's the same reason why I sucked at this track. Believe me, I sucked at this track too when I initially played it. But, you know, 12-year-old me loved fucking bouncing around, so I played it for hours on the Game Boy. Like, once I finished the Grand Prix mode and whatever, I would go back to, like, time trials and just play this track over and over again, try to beat the Staff Ghost by as much time as I could. And I knew that there were even crazier strategies than what I was even capable of doing, but either way, it was a lot of fun. Oh yeah, who's heard about this guy, Mark Robinson? This is one of the things that has been making me super frustrated that my stream has been experiencing issues because I really wanted to talk about how funny that all is. Uh, Mark Robinson, the self-proclaimed black Nazi from North Carolina, who has a storied history of having an account on a porn site for which he used his real name and email address. I'm not joking. Uh, and was a serial gooner for trans women. I'll say that much. Yeah, mini soldier. That's right. That's the guy. Um, and so that all has been heating up to the point where now my man isn't just losing the election. Yeah, homie was chasing. He was absolutely chasing. He was on that grind. Um, and as a result, not because of the Nazi shit, presumably, most Republicans are pretty okay with Nazism. Probably, I would say, because my man is a certified chaser, he is now losing the election in North Carolina as fuck. Polls are devilish, whatever. We all know the drill, except for when they indicate things that are funny or that we like, right? So, my man's down like 20 points, is what I'm trying to say. But on top of that, there's one other thing that makes this election cycle very notable, because the self-parody did not stop there. We all love a good self-parody. AIPAC wanted to get in on the fun of self-parodying, that is. And so AIPAC actually had condemned the Democratic candidate running in the race, Josh Stein. Now, you may notice, I know it's a stereotype, but you may notice my man has a very Jewish-sounding name, and Josh Stein is indeed Jewish. AIPAC, the self-proclaimed defender of Jewish people in America and Israel and whatever, condemned the Jewish candidate for supposedly, I don't know, anti-Semitism or something. And then, for Mark Robinson, self-proclaimed black Nazi, I sleep. But Josh Stein, guy who may as well not even be there, real shit. Yeah, he's actually here's I think this is what they AIPAC didn't like about Josh Stein, is that he's not 100% completely pro-Israel. He I think there's one news outlet that described it as he's trying to thread the needle, which again is like, we can on the left, where you typically, we find that to be pretty politically dishonest. In fact, I find that to be pretty politically dishonest, trying to determine what your position is based on what's most expedient, probably for the party, because we know that the majority of the American public is pro-Palestine and vehemently critical of Israel and stuff. But even trying to not just be uncritically supportive of Israel earned Josh Stein the sort of the tut-tutting from AIPAC. Meanwhile, Mark Robinson, because he's presumably a pro-Israel Nazi, they're like, yep, seems good to me. Thankfully, to the extent that people in America are aware of AIPAC, I don't think anybody holds a terribly positive opinion of them. Although their power does not come from public perception. Their power comes from, having large amounts of money being funded by and working with billionaires, and that sort of political influence peddling. Am I gonna front run this track and get away with it? We'll see. We'll see. It'd certainly be funny. Also, notably, I did not. I don't think I have heard anything about AIPAC like talking about Trump saying, "If I lose, it will be the Jews' fault" or something like that. Another thing that Trump has said recently, you know, I'm loath to be on the perpetual orange man bad train because I think that detracts from the systemic analysis that is to be had with the entire Republican Party being just as bad, if not worse, than Trump on an ideological level. But AIPAC loves to play the role of, like I said, the defender of the Jewish community, even if they don't actually act as though they care about the Jewish community at large. They love to say such and such is anti-Semitic, and that's bad. But noticeably, this does not pertain to when somebody actually says, I hate the Jews. It only curiously portends to the state of Israel rather than the actual Jewish community at home or abroad. Especially when, like I said, Trump blames the Jews for potentially him losing, or if or when Netanyahu decides to commit his next war crime and say that, by the way, Israel is the only Jewish state and is the haven and representative of like all Jewish people or something like that. Really great political org. Let me see if this article. Nope. Okay. Here, let me see if I can find something on this, just because I think it'd be extremely funny. I guess there's nothing directly um, that I could find from like a 10-minute, or not 10-minute, 10-second Google search about that. Probably have to look for that later in like the editing process, if I make that a segment. This does actually, this speaks to one of the ways in which I think America is uniquely poised to fight fascism, as opposed to other countries, maybe, which is that in America, dropping the mask is not a politically viable move. For example, Mark Robinson saying that he's a black Nazi, revealing himself to be God's strongest chaser, or maybe Satan's strongest chaser, who knows, has severely damaged his political campaign, and is it's not really resulting in him getting any additional political clout or influence or what have you. It has impacted him negatively, being an overt Nazi, as opposed to somebody who believes every single thing word for word that the Nazis believe, but does not say that he's a Nazi. What's a chaser? A chaser is somebody who is really, really, really down bad for trans women. And often in a pretty creepy and like sort of objectifying way. For example, a lot of Nazis are themselves chasers. They view trans women as degenerate and whatever, but they sort of view it as one of their own sexual perversions or whatever. It's like it's a combination a little bit of like sexual attraction and disgust. Yeah, a prerequisite is also them being transphobic. Somebody who's like transphobic but is really, really horny for trans women. Like, they view it as purely a sexual thing. Oh no? Yeah. Yeah. So most of the time, you see Nazis, they're chasers. you know? They're doing some freaky deaky shit. But what I wanted to focus on mostly is that in a lot of other countries, in Europe, there are far right parties that have dropped the mask to a much larger extent than the Republican Party has in the United States, and in a lot of cases still maintain a good amount of popular support. For example, the AfD in Germany has put up posters of them Sieg Heiling, basically writing down the 14 words again, saying that we need to be proud of Germany's history, specifically in reference to the way that they talk about the Holocaust, all sorts of stuff. And they still have a strong base of popular support in a multi-party system. But in the United States, the Republicans are having an extremely difficult time maintaining popular support to such an extent that it still has to be a massive part of their political program that they are suppressing the vote and trying to subvert elections because they know that they can't win by legitimate means. If Republicans could drop the mask, they would, but they're having a hard enough time as it is not having dropped the mask. America just doesn't have the sauce for Nazism, I think. As weird as that sounds. And I think it has something to do with how much the United States has dealt with like the forefront of social issues throughout its lifespan, however wrong the general consensus has been at any given time. The US has always been sort of at that point relative to other parts of what we would consider the developed world. And just the issue polling data that we have does indicate that the US is a really progressive country on the whole, like much more socially progressive than most countries in Europe, And thus people in America, because they are more likely to know somebody who is an immigrant or who's like second or third generation, somebody who's queer, something like that. The compelling factor of like the reactionary social narratives of fascism is going to be a lot less strong. You have to disguise it more. In order to really convince anybody. Like, I know that there are some people in my audience who aren't entirely convinced by me saying that America is very socially progressive on the whole, and that's okay. You guys can be wrong, but I will explain it in a way that I think is easier to understand. If you ask like a European liberal on their position on one of the various like ethnic groups of Europe that come from a poorer country, if you ask the average European liberal about the Romani people, the Roma, or about Romanians, or about any given like ethnicity of people from Southern Europe, from the Mediterranean and whatever, you would hear some Hitlerite shit. You would hear some shit about they're just worse, their culture is terrible, they can't assimilate to us, blah, 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 they shouldn't be allowed to come here. Pretty bad shit, right? And this would apply to them dealing with them in day-to-day life as well. If you ask an American liberal or even an American conservative their opinion on immigrants, let's say, immigrants largely being ethnic minorities in America, but that come from Latin America, it might sound similar. Certainly like, there's a bunch of criminals coming up and whatever, but there will always be that caveat that, well, if they come here legally, it's fine. I'm all for legal immigration. And especially if you ask them about, I don't know, Jorge, the guy they know at work, they'll be like, oh, well, he's good. He's a good guy. I like him. If you present socialist policies without presenting them as socialism, communism, I think a majority of Americans would agree. You're absolutely right. And that's not just conjecture or like a feeling that we have here. This is actually borne out in polling data and in referendums. For example, when you ask people about rent control or price control, you use the terms price control, rent control, whatever, people don't like it. They associate that with, I don't know, Stalin, Soviet Union, economic planning. But when you ask people about limiting the extent to which rents can increase, when you don't use the term price control or rent control, but you describe fundamentally what is the same policy meant to achieve the same objective, people love that shit. Because everybody has a decent grasp of their own economic interest. People know, like, yeah, the rent is way too fucking high, groceries are way too fucking expensive, you know, I can't afford to live, and you know that's got to change. I don't care how much it hurts the big fucking shareholders' fees, you know. That's one of the things that I was sort of referring to when I said that, like, you know, in my other video about socialism, that like socialism kind of needs a rebrand. People like the ideas that socialism is all about. People like democracy. People like, you know, egalitarian economic policy making. People like that stuff. You know, you frame it as an economic bill of rights or whatever. People like that. But they don't like the words socialism and communism. I mean, I can't even afford to die. That's fucking expensive. Yeah. Can't afford to live, can't afford to die, can barely afford to exist. Average neoliberal country, I suppose. Um, but all that to say, right, the sort of socioeconomic undercurrent of progressivism in the United States is such that, like, you can't really, like, calling yourself a black Nazi and then being the world's most chaser of all time is still going to be extremely detrimental to your campaign. Like, you know, in America, you can't just get up there and say the 14 words and expect to win an election. In Germany, you can do that, you know? And that's why the Republican Party is struggling so hard in America. That's why they have to cheat in order to win. That's why they can't win through the, you know, typical sort of democratic processes. And that's actually important to take away because that provides a very significant avenue by which the sort of leftist antithesis can be realized against fascists and against their sort of accolades from the neoconservative you know, holdover days. Right? If, you know, we have this ongoing resurgence of organized labor in America, if you start working into the mix more and more socialist policies, more and more socialistic ideas, but you just don't call it socialism, people are going to like that. And that represents a genuine, like a real political path out of the crisis of liberalism and away from the throes of fascism. You know, it takes, like, if you can take the populist fire from fascism, they lose. Fascists only are able to get away with, like, marketing themselves as populist because liberals are professedly anti-populist. You know, like, they're not really populist. They are extremely collectivist and would double down on all of the hierarchical tendencies in a liberal system. They can they can only call themselves populist because they lie, and there is no real populist for them to be compared to. You know, think about how ubiquitously people like Bernie Sanders. Think about how little credible criticism there is of Bernie Sanders circulating in the media right now. Imagine if the entire left had that sort of political optics and you know, political stances and such to galvanize around, and that recognition too. Somehow in second. Oh, bro, Carter in first. Damn. I'm gonna let you have first. I ain't even gonna lie. Nice. Wait, did I lag him? Did I lag past him and get first? I guess I did get a lag start at the beginning. Yeah. It be that way sometimes. That was really meandering. I don't know, that might not be a segment, but I'm glad I talked about it on stream. Because it is funny. That was originally, that was me talking about Mark Robinson and why it is extremely funny that what has been unfolding has been unfolding. You know, in addition to him losing hella support in the polls, people have been quitting his campaign. You know, it's not because anybody's finding out about this for the first time, right? Like, anybody who's on the man's campaign, anybody who is part of the Republican Party in the state of North Carolina, they knew this guy was like this, but they have to hold that mask up. And if they, like, if they vocally defended him, that would be them sort of dropping the mask. You know? Which, you know, Republicans can't do. Like, you know, a lot of the MAGA types, even. This is where it becomes relevant that the cult of personality around Trump truly is a cult of personality. A lot of the MAGA types, I don't think, are ready to just call themselves Nazis yet. Even if, like, you ask them and they kind of believe everything that the Nazis believe, I think they would genuinely see, like, oh, Nazis are horrible, they're authoritarian, they have no respect for democracy, whatever, and they killed a lot of Jewish people, you know? There would always be that nagging thought in their mind, and so they're comfortable being part of that fascist movement as long as Trump is around. And I'm sure once Trump is gone, they will become part of the fascist movement in the Republican Party. But you know, it represents a just another block of wood on the pile as to why the Republicans have to keep the mask up in their sort of their campaigning for Nazism in America. Bound to happen. It kind of blown up. Yep. Makes sense. Getting hit by a Mega at this point is probably one of the worst things that could have happened. Oh, what if? God, how funny would this be if I... Okay, well. 5th place is whatever. I've also been seeing in the news cycle. This is the big item right now in international politics. It always tends to be this way, that in the United States, there's like one big thing in international politics at a time. That seems to be all the public has an appetite for. Regardless, right now is the fact that Israel is clearly like escalating tensions by attacking Lebanon, and it's pretty clear that they're preparing to go to war. Jesus Christ. Israeli raids kill 569 people, including 50 kids. Bombardment of various parts of Lebanon, according to the Lebanese Health Ministry. Struggling to see any more details of that, but you know, Israel has been increasingly shelling Lebanon more than Gaza, probably just because, like, where the fuck else do you bomb in Gaza? Like Gaza's gone. There's nothing left there, right? Like 80 to 90% of the buildings have been all destroyed. You know, so you'd just be bombing, like. Well, I guess Israel is perfectly content to continue bombing refugee camps and such because their objective is to kill a bunch of people. But, like, so disgusting, and people say it's not genocide. Yeah, and as is characteristic of this kind of discussion, the position being expressed there is not really that it's not a genocide, but rather that it's okay that Israel is committing a genocide there. Like, if you were to actually interrogate somebody on their beliefs as to whether or not Israel is committing a genocide, like, the answer is so obvious that, like, you can't even go into the nitty-gritty of litigating it, because at that point, the only argue that you can make is that, well, Israel has to be allowed to finish the genocide for it to be a genocide, which is just a pro-genocide argument, right? Any way you slice that argument, the only thing that somebody who defends Israel can argue is functionally that Israel should be allowed to do a genocide. Oops. And of course, now they're not just content with doing the genocide in Gaza. They have sought to expand their war aims. In fact, that's how I saw it framed in news outlets covering the issue, is that Israel is expanding their war aims to encompass targets up north in Lebanon. You know, they've dropped all pretense that this was ever about like, I don't know, containing threats from terrorism and whatever. Especially since, you know, they've seen that American media is just going to go to bat for them when they commit, like, straight-up acts of terrorism. You know, seriously, first it was the pager attacks, then it was the walkie-talkie attacks, and now there's, like, shelling in various Lebanese neighborhoods up north, and you know, it's pretty clear what Israel is trying to do. They're trying to soften it up for a ground invasion because of Netanyahu's oft-expressed territorial, like, expansionist ambitions to annex not only Palestine, but also parts of Lebanon and I believe Syria and Egypt, if he can get away with it. You know? And that, you know, to the credit of the like, masterminds in Israel that are sort of cooking up these military plans, they might be able to get away with it if the United States continues to just let them, right? In fact, I think I saw that the U.S. is going to be sending, I might have seen that the U.S. was going to, like, send troops or, like, a carrier group or something to basically be the guy standing on the sidelines with their arms folded, looking real intimidated, so that nobody tries to, like, actually rein Israel in. Although I could be, that could be Mandela effect, I could be misremembering that, but I'm pretty sure I saw that somewhere. I know that, you know, I talked about this in my video a while back when I was playing Pokemon Emerald Rogue, when I said that Israel is getting ready to invade Lebanon, right? Because they've had these ambitions for some time. They've invaded before, but, like, you know, at the time it was like, it seemed it was kind of ambiguous whether it'd be happening soon or whatever. And, like, I still do believe that, like, Israel is getting ready to attack Lebanon. I don't know, like, I'm not some sort of expert on like the policy wonkery of how military planning happens in government. You know, I wouldn't be able to give you a direct timetable, but I do believe that the same sentiments that were at play back then are at play now, and this is part of a consistent through line where Israel is like thinking, okay, part of this project of living space is we want to, you know, purge everybody out of Gaza, we want to take over the West Bank completely, and we want to make land grabs, like land acquisitions from parts of Lebanon and Syria as well, you know? Got him. And I got blue shield. Anybody gonna... Oh, whew! He tried to squish me, but he didn't get it. And didn't get an item. That's okay, there's plenty of item boxes to be had. Please take the shortcut, don't hit me. Okay. No! I took my star. Alright, I'm gonna do this. Here, let me go to the side of you here, so... I know to that guy I might have looked a certain way, but I genuinely was trying to go wide of him so I didn't hit him while I was in a star. Because I hate when that happens, when I'm, like, sitting pretty, I've got a Mega Mushroom, and then a bullet just comes out of nowhere. And all the shit in politics makes me sound like a broken record all the time. You know, like my analysis for this shit is the same because the same mistake keeps happening every single time, right? Like with when fascists gain ground, it's always because of like, you know, obviously austerity politics created this cost of living crisis and crisis of alienation, and people like their paychecks are going less far, society's becoming more difficult to interact with, things matter less to people, and whatever. It like the sort of hierarchical nature of the interest of capital and whatever, and all of that necessitates a leftist antithesis to the fascist thesis and whatever. And then with Israel, with the United States supporting fascism abroad, the same thing applies. Israel would not be doing this shit if we weren't letting them do this shit. You know, like the United States has recently they've figured out, like I guess the Democratic Party has figured out that they can get a little bit more leeway. They can get a little bit more grace from the public if they say, "Oh, we're working tirelessly for a ceasefire." But that shit doesn't work when you have unlimited leverage over the country that you're sort of whinging about, right? Like that shit doesn't work when you don't have to be working tirelessly, when you can make a phone call to like the Israeli prime minister's office and be like, you know, you're gonna do a ceasefire right now, otherwise you're not getting another dollar. Like, you know, that's what's up. You can do a ceasefire or you can stop getting any money from us, like at all. You know, like when that option is on the table, the talking point of, oh, we're working towards de-escalation and we're working tirelessly for a ceasefire doesn't work. It doesn't land. You know, it's empty. You know, and that's the line that the United States has been going with. You know, the Democrats preach and do nothing, and then the Republicans preach about how they would enthusiastically give more to Israel to like continue the genocide. But it's like I say that every single time, and as long as that doesn't get fixed, that's probably all I'm going to have to say about the issue. And this is another component part of how liberal institutions like the Democratic Party like systemically shut out the left. You know, we all saw how the protests went, the pro-Palestine protests earlier this year. Truthfully, it is very tiring. Oop. Ow. Why does the bullet go that wide? I don't get it. And I missed all the boost panels. Great. I missed this one. Unfortunate race. And of course, I also wouldn't doubt, like, this is going to be a contributing factor to the campaign in the United States as well. Like, it's entirely possible Netanyahu and Israel are specifically waiting for a moment when it would most impact the results of the election in America to invade Lebanon. Because as much as, like, Biden and Harris are, like, enablers of Israel, like I've said on various other occasions, liberalism represents a weaker opposition to socialism and to leftist politics than fascism does. And Netanyahu wants Trump in office. He wants fascists to be running the United States government. First of all, because he's a fascist, and fascists, they are gay for each other like that. But then also because that insulates him from any potential criticism from the United States or from the international public. It insulates him from anything that could potentially or it insulates him and Israel from anything that could potentially prevent them from carrying the genocide out in full. You know? And of course, it also gets him closer to his objectives of that, like, greater Israel, right? Alright, get me through this section. Oh, nice. I have dodged the shock. At probably the best possible position, too. Oh my god, I didn't even know it was possible to fall off like that. Alright, well now I'm in second. If I can get an item here, I'll be pretty happy. Alright. That's pretty good. He hit banana. Okay, did it right that time. Give me an item again, please. Thank you. Oh, okay. Yeah, go on ahead, Broseph. No! Took that turn super wide because my wheelie locked. Ah! Alright, that's fine. Third place. We take those. Oh yeah, speaking of liberalism. I saw this, and you know, usually I don't go to like random Twitter posts and stuff for things that I talk about on stream, unless I believe they present good opportunities for analysis. And I believe this does. This is one thing that showcases why I make the argument that you know, liberalism is the moderate wing of fascism, or alternatively, you could express this as fascism being the extremist wing of liberalism. The one time Stalin was cooking was when he said that. But there's a line that liberals very, very frequently refer to, and I mean really frequently, about America, liberals in America particularly, and they say shit like, America has struggled to live up to its ideals. Motherfucker, no it hasn't. Like, the people who say that, right? Like, this outlines one of the fundamental flaws of liberalism from the get-go, which is that it is a very spiritualist and materialist ideology. It is interested in idealism in the philosophical sense, but then also it loves to pretend that the mission of America, like the initial founding precepts of America, were good and noble and like always meant to be democratic and inclusive. Motherfucker, you're acting like the Chinese exclusion laws weren't a thing that exists. You're acting like slavery wasn't a thing that exists. This is not a quote-unquote failure for America to live up to its ideals, because the vast majority of the public would hold that those ideals included things like the Chinese Exclusion Act when that was passed, and slavery when that was passed. This is some like blatantly revisionist shit where you rewrite history to make America look better than it actually is. At the end of the day, the reason that America broke away from the United Kingdom was twofold. Number one, taxation without representation. Very common line, has to do with, material interests. Certainly this garnered a lot of support from below. That's one thing, right? The other thing was that there was a wealthy planter class in America that was not of noble blood. Basically, there was a sort of nouveau riche aristocracy in America with a distinct set of material interests from the aristocracies of Europe because they were not related to noble families by blood necessarily. And they wanted those interests to be protected. America was built on the property interests of slaveholders. And that's what it was. That's what it continues to be. A country, a liberal democracy, built, or I guess a liberal state, built on the property interests of property owners, whose wealth has been built off the mass exploitation of, well, underclasses, be they racially driven or purely economically driven, right? That is America. And that is, to a certain extent, every liberal state that currently exists on Earth, is that there's a constant struggle back and forth between classes, and the founding fathers of America were just the sort of new, like, upper class at the time that enshrined into the narrative that they were like, I don't know, these fucking noblesse oblige or whatever, that they had such lofty goals and principles. Basically, the narrative that America has struggled to live up to its ideals was written by rich slave owners that were jerking themselves raw about how smart they are, right? And that's about as much respect as I have for that viewpoint, and conversely, or I guess by extension, that's about as much respect as I have for the people who espouse that viewpoint, because shut the fuck up. You're not fooling anybody, right? It's like, you know what it does too? It externalizes all of those problems. These problems are inherent to the project of a liberal state, but by continually referring over and over again to that framing of oh, we've struggled to live up to our ideals, they pose it as some sort of, not literally foreign as in threat from without the country's borders, but foreign as in it wasn't baked into the founding of this state to begin with. That framing implies that there's some sort of ever-changing, conveniently ambiguous, morally virtuous core of, like, American values. It doesn't mean anything. Like, you say the words American values, what the fuck does that mean? When have values ever been determined nationalistically, right? That's some shit that fascists say. German values, French values, British values. That's some shit that I would expect to hear when somebody's about to explain why, like, they want to reject all immigration applications or asylum applications from Yemen, right? Like, that's not some shit that you should just be saying if you're not, like, a flaming racist, right? If you're not literally a retard, you don't believe that. You know? If you have any capacity for critical thought, you would very easily be able to recognize that, like, the things that would make somebody say, oh, America has struggled to live up to its ideals are nothing more than the sort of historical processes of material interest, you know, sort of pushing back and forth that results in the mass exploitation of people. And it's not like some idealistically, religiously determined thing that, oh, this country always had good values, but we failed to live up to them. It's idiotic. And it, like, you might be able to tell how much I get frustrated by it with how incoherent I'm sounding in describing it, right? Like, ugh, that tends to be the case whenever something comes up that, like, gets me so out of sorts, right? No, fucking, uh. I'd appreciate it if you didn't use the R word. I'm sure you would, but I have the pass, so I will use it if I feel it appropriate. And that word accurately conveys this disdain for which I view people who hold that viewpoint, because it is stupid beyond, almost beyond words, right? And of course, anybody who comes to the channel knows that, like, the word retard is not something I use to describe people who have, like, mental conditions such as autism, ADHD, Tourette's, etc., or, like, cerebral palsy or whatever, right? This is not, like, a sort of, this is not a matter of immutable characteristics. These people have chosen to believe this, right? Like, it costs you $0 to stop believing this. You know? Oops. I can agree to that. They are. Yeah, and that's the context in which I will use words like that. Language like that, rather. In general. Wingcapman, hello, welcome to chat. I guess now might be a good opportunity for me to take a step back. Now that I've emotionally exploded at liberals for being liberals and thus being the stupidest people on planet Earth, aside from fascists, not a high bar, I want to go back and explore, like, a more academically why the framing of America has struggled to live up to its ideals is a load of bullshit. First of all, I want to hammer in on the last point that I made, which is that it doesn't mean anything. Like I said, American values are not a real thing that exists. It's like the term patriotism. Patriotism isn't real, right? It's just the liberal reskin of nationalism. Such is the case with we've struggled to live up to our values. This is just a meaningless phrase that can be invoked as a thought-terminating cliche to excuse the crimes against humanity and genocides that America has committed in decades, in centuries past, as sort of oopsie. You know, that's basically the purpose of that phrase, right? And that's the purpose of that narrative, that political narrative, that America is a fundamentally good country, but we've struggled to live up to our ideals. It's a form of American exceptionalism that whitewashes all of the misdeeds of the American government, of the American public, of the military, etc., 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 right? And especially, this is the other point, of the planter class that founded this country. America was not founded as a democratic experiment. Democracy at the time, not an experiment. Democracies existed as microstates in Europe. There were republics elsewhere. A republican form of government was by no means a question mark or an unknown quantity. No, the experiment, rather, or the thing that was somewhat different about America was, first of all, I think it was one of the first colonial breakaway states, if memory serves. But then also, the class dynamic in America was more straightforwardly capitalist than the emerging capitalism of Europe at the time. In Europe, you still mostly had an intact feudal order, where although, they were reaching at various points a sort of late stage feudalism, there was still like a noblesse of the robe, of the sword, and this was determined by blood affiliation. Your family ties effectively determined what class you were a part of, what relationship you had to the politics and economics of the country. But in the United States, there was a growing sentiment among the wealthy class that they should be on top. And the wealthy class in the United States was actually not of the same character of the wealthy classes of Europe. The sort of the merchant classes of Europe were gaining a foothold, but the ruling classes of Europe were still of the sort of noble. They were of noble blood, and they were members of the clergy and things like that. It was determined by family affiliation, by church affiliation, by education, and things like that. And in America, the planters, the people who owned the slave plantations and who owned the sort of crop production, think of the cash crops of cotton and tobacco at the time. They were like, well, no, we want to be the ones running the show, basically. There was a class conflict between the nouveau riche of America, who did not have noble blood affiliation, and the the old nobles of Britain and the rest of Europe. That sort of came to a head, especially through the lack of representation in the British Parliament when it came to matters of taxation. So, as a result, the sort of the sentiment began to build along those taxation without representation lines, because that was a very convenient populist narrative that could be invoked. As such, after several years of this, after a couple decades of this, you get the American Revolution, which fundamentally is about a American vanguard of planters asserting their independence from the British and old European, by extension, political systems. And thus was established the American Republic, where now the only requirements to participate in political society were that you be white, male, and propertied. Very conveniently, what the America has struggled to live up to ideals narrative has left out was that for a large part of America's history, the requirements to be allowed to vote, to be allowed to participate in the supposed democracy, the Republican institutions that we had, were that you be white, a man, and that you have property to your name, that you have wealth to your name. If you were propertyless, if you were, propertyless, non-white, or God forbid, a woman, then life in America was fundamentally very similar to life in feudal Europe, in the sense that you had no say. Your role was purely in the domicile or at whatever place of work you sort of slaved away at, sometimes literally if you were an enslaved person. And it most certainly was not a morally nobly intended liberal democracy simply struggling to live up to its ideals, right? The sort of cause of America had been well established. The material interests of America had begun to be realized. It was about the planters. That was their objective. It's only over time that other material interests began to assert themselves. The interests of the abolitionists, the women's groups, the anarchists, the socialists, in very later parts, the American Indians and stuff like that, to whatever extent they could, right? There are no ideals at the core of America, right? Because history is not an idealistically driven process. It is a materially driven process. And you can say that ideology is a component part of that, and that is true. But ideology is a material force that primarily regards the world like in terms of how it ought to be organized, i.e. in material relations. Ideology pertains to the material relations of the world. So, like, there is no dimension along which the phrase "America has simply failed to live up to its ideals" is a true statement, or is even a statement with any meaning beyond obfuscating the historical path that American society has taken. Does that make sense? Basically, I'm calling this is a more academic and well-reasoned way of me saying that liberals are stupid and fundamentally don't understand the processes that drive history or the incentives at play in any major point in American history when they say things like, America has simply failed to live up to its ideals. It's a good country. There are no good countries, because countries serve the propertied class interest. That's what a nation state is meant to do. And, ensure stability through threat of violence. Very common critique of the state. But, anybody who knows history knows that, that's not what's going on there. The whole ideals shit fucking does. Yeah. It'd be like if I said that, again, I will go back to what I invoked at the start of this more academic teardown, which is that imagine if you were to go to another country, Russia, let's say, Germany, German values, Russian values, That's some shit that you would expect to hear out of the mouth of an AfD politician or out of Vladimir Putin as they justify ethnic discrimination and sort of anti-immigrant policymaking or even internment camp. These people are incompatible with our German values, with our Russian values. Oh, that's not in keeping with our American values. It doesn't matter if you're saying this nominally as an argument against fascism, that's still fascism. Because it's a sort of essentialist, deterministic, spiritualist, and anti-materialist way of arguing that, like, oh, there's no possible way that America could do something bad, because if it did something bad, actually that wasn't America doing that. You understand? That's kind of where that externalizing of all America's problems comes in. You know, by saying America failed to live up to its ideals, you are imagining, like, people are imagining that America at some point had, like, a truly morally white core, you know, in terms of, like, you know, yin and yang, black and white, whatever, that it ever, like, was trying to live up to. That's just not how this works. You know? But I think I've harped on that long enough. Certainly, any of the conservatives in my audience aren't going to be convinced by that because they're brainlets, and I use several, like, $5 words in that analysis. This is mostly meant for the ears of liberals with, I don't know, some capacity for critical thought, maybe. You know, it certainly does. I'm not making any friends by the fact that I called liberals stupid, but again, this is meant to communicate also how little respect I have for that viewpoint and the sort of dangerous places that it leads. You know? That's going to be a very, like, eclectic... is that the right word? Eclectic? Maybe more eccentric segment. I don't know how, like... again, don't know how wide of an appeal that's going to have. But I think that, like, this is, if nothing else, this is valuable academic analysis. And I think it can help to sort of break down the barriers to understanding American politics. Because American exceptionalism comes very, very deeply baked in to the American education system. I wheelie bumped. I swerved on purpose there. Anyways, cut the segment, future me. You know what to do in the editing. Yeah. Oh, actually, what? No, don't cut it yet. Love how you send messages to future you. Yeah, it's great because I do all my own editing. I have to, like, tell future me, like, all right, cut it there so that like I know. But actually, future me, don't cut it yet. There's, like, one last thing I wanted to add, which is that just as, like, a super easy encapsulation, that all of this ultimately comes down to the fact that, you know, liberals are the system. You know, they are the system in which we live. Liberalism is the ideological order of the day. And liberals are a part of that. They align ideologically with the system. And they are thus incapable of that self-critique for the most part. You know, for liberals, because we already live in the perfect system, it's liberalism, there can't possibly be any flaws with how that system operates, with the sort of like founding relations of it, of the sort of, like, you know, the bedrock on which liberalism is built can't have any, like, flaws in it that produce bad outcomes because, you know, liberalism is the best system. Why, like, you know? And that's ultimately, I think that's why thought-terminating cliches like that get so easily perpetuated, because it's way easier to say that and to abrogate responsibility than it is for liberals to recognize that something could be wrong with liberalism, right? Now cut it. Now cut the segment. Just a little bit more of that analysis about it being sort of an externalizing force. Oh, this is interesting. Rip. Fourth? Okay, not bad. I'll take fourth. Fourth, not 25th. There we go. There we go. Ooh. I wonder. There doesn't seem to be all that much. Going on. I don't know. Whoa, okay. This is... Oh, okay, good. This is 2 laps. Nice. Ah, no! Thought I'd be able to sneak under that. I was gonna say, this is one of the longest custom tracks, despite being like a direct port. But it's 2 laps and not 3, so that's nice. Okay. I'm gonna chain this. Maybe I'll get the shock. And that's exactly what I got. Probably gonna chain this, not gonna do anything super imaginative, I don't know. Yeah. Dodge somebody, but whatever. I just need to get back in the race, basically. Give me a mushroom, thank you. Use this here. Excuse me, gonna take the inside line. Y'all might want to move out of the way. Okay. Cool. I have 1 rotating green shell in 5th. This is not a great spot to be in. Don't get squished by that. The best item in the game! Let's go. Oh, I got him. Wow. Everybody getting bloopered. The race is mine. Oh, I tried to go through those like goalposts and it didn't work. Throw that. Okay, I somehow hit that guy. This last half of this lap is going insane. I'm just gonna use that there. Pick. Oh no! Okay, come on. Is he gonna draft? Maybe. Okay. Well, if nothing else, that race was very entertaining for all parties involved, I believe. Oh yeah, y'all want to talk about fucking voter purges? Europeans are going to be fucking floored by this, this entire concept. So as the election draws near, the Republicans usually get up to some chicanery, the right-wing party. They usually try to fuck with the election, by which I mean in various states that could be like in contention for voting for one party or the other. They go and remove people's names from the voter lists. They deregister people without telling them. And that's been happening in quite a few states lately. I believe in the state of Texas already 1 million people have been removed from the voter lists. In Ohio, it's something like 60,000. In North Carolina, they are planning to remove about 200,000 people. They can do that? Yeah, they can. And in Pennsylvania, I believe they've done low tens of thousands, I think, of people. That's one way in which the Republicans do election interference and election suppression. They also are known to. This is something to watch out for as the month of October and November come around. They will close polling places when the voting starts. They'll say like, oh, where are the neighborhoods that vote mostly for the Democratic Party, right? Like, these majority black neighborhoods, these neighborhoods where a lot of ethnic minorities live, where a lot of poor people live. Close all of the schools and libraries and public buildings on election day in those neighborhoods so people can't vote. And also, potentially, even remove mailboxes. This is not, like, the Republicans have done this, I think, a couple of times in like, 2020, 2022. Voting by mail is a recent phenomenon in the United States, and sometimes you'll have to drop it as at a designated drop box. Republican parties have sort of caught on to this and started to remove those drop boxes so that people have nowhere to put their ballots, so that people basically have nowhere to vote. And that has actually enabled Republicans to win elections that they were projected to otherwise have a very tight election in. It has made the difference. And there's a much more concerted effort this time to do it than in other elections in years past. There's a sort of national plan by the Republican Party to shut down a bunch of polling places, to do all of the usual voter suppression, and also to use the loyalists that they have in bureaucratic positions to effectively refuse to certify the results of the election if the Democratic Party, the Liberal Party, wins. The Fascist Party is saying straight up, if the Liberal Party wins the election, then in all the offices where we can do this, we are not going to acknowledge that they won the election, and we will instead file the election as like a win for us, basically. And I said that the only obstacle to this happening would be the fascists themselves. Because fascists are incompetent, because fascism in the United States is very institutionalist rather than populist, and because liberals are incompetent and don't want to fight fascism, oftentimes the only thing getting in the way of fascists is fascists. And sometimes it works out, but it's not going to work out forever. Like I said, already, like, there's one state that could have flipped potentially that is subject to this, being North Carolina. That's going to create a lot of uncertainty this election. It is not out of the realm of possibility that the Republicans simply win by cheating, and the Democrats do nothing to stop them. This would not even be the first time that they've done this either. For example, in the year 2000, another strategy that I have yet to mention that they used was that they sort of arbitrarily set different parameters for counting votes so that it would take longer in order to generate controversy over how long the counting of the votes takes, and then use that very elongated period of time to justify cutting off the counting of votes early before all the votes were in, and sort of just declare a win for the conservative candidate right there. To give an example of how this went out, or how this could play out, they could elect to do this in the state of Georgia, in the South, and simply decide very conveniently, oh, well, you look at that. The deadline for us counting all these votes has expired. While we have tens of thousands of votes for the Democratic Party sitting uncounted, I guess those votes will all just have to go to the trash bin. You know, or since they don't know what the votes are before they count them, we'll say votes from majority Democratic neighborhoods, like majority liberal neighborhoods, from like majority black neighborhoods, from poor neighborhoods, and whatever, you know. And that's how the Republicans would win the election if they were to win. That's their only path to victory. You know, and the reason that they do this, the reason that Republicans do this, is because their policies are not popular. This is one way in which fascism in the United States takes a little bit of a different shape than fascism in Europe and in other countries in the West. Is that fascism in America couldn't build that base of popular support, at least not one large enough to win elections by a popular mandate. They have to cheat to win. It's not just like they have to lie on TV. They have to sort of spread all sorts of malicious narratives about immigration and whatever. They actually have to subvert the election in order to gain power in the first place. You know? Oh, barely pulled that in time. Ow! Alright, I'm getting fucked. What about Germany? TF4 win. TF for win. MKW. Welcome to chat. What do you mean? What about Germany? You mean about the fascists cheating to win the election? As far as I know, the fascist parties in Germany right now, are they still the bad? Like is Germany still bad? Yeah, I'd say, you know, Germany's pretty cringe right now. You know, there seems to be, you know, fascism is still on the rise in Germany, and the government is still like one of the most ardent supporters of Israel, supporting fascism abroad, you know, basically doing nothing as fascism gains power domestically as well. So I'd say that's pretty bad, yeah. You know, thankfully the Nazis didn't win the regional elections in Brandenburg, but since the only options there are like Nazis and then liberals, which are the circumstances that produced the Nazis in the first place, you know, it's not like that's gonna really change too much. Like, shit's still not good over there, yeah. Okay, I did that a little too well. I cleared that a little too hard, and as a result, sort of almost hit the edge and fell off there. I think I know where I want to use this. Which party rules Germany today? Currently, I think the party in government is the Social Democratic Party. The Social Democratic Party leads the coalition in Germany federally. But Germany is a federalist system, so there are various different state governments as well. And unfortunately, the projections right now are that, you know, since the election is upcoming, I love this track. This track is great. Since the elections are upcoming, it's the current projections are that the Social Democratic Party, the SPD, is not going to be the majority governing party for very much longer. In fact, I think the AfD is projected to be the largest party after the 2024 German elections, if I remember the polling data I've seen correctly. But even if that's not the case, even if like the Social Democrats hang on for like one more election cycle, it's not like the advance of fascism in Germany is being meaningfully curtailed in any way. And it doesn't seem like the sort of social democratic platform is changing in any way either to sort of combat that, to sort of give meaningful redress to the issues that have caused people to go with far-right populism in the first place, if that makes sense. Will do. Okay. And another race where I kind of get fucked at the end. Oh, well. Oops. There we go. I keep dropping frames. This has been I've had a consistent like 15% frame drop. Time for me to go. Have a nice day, you all. Well, thanks for stopping by and tuning into stream. Have a good one. What else was I looking at for today? Not much. I think today was very electoral politics driven. Let me see if I can see. News. Yeah, all of this is going to be about the election trail and the election campaign. Oh, hey, here's a fun thing. You guys want an example of a liberal who constantly engages in the framing that, like, nothing could possibly be wrong. Would you say that the Germans learned something after World War II? No, actually, I would not say that. I think that's what we are now seeing, which is that no major lessons were actually learned from the Second World War. If anything, the fascists after the Second World War were given the perfect disguise behind which to hide. It gave them the perfect set of overt talking points to avoid. Not that they're very good at avoiding them, in order to face less of a challenge when constructing a mass movement the next time around. Fascism didn't disappear after the Second World War. It just went underground. And the liberals did not learn any lessons about how to prevent such a thing from happening again. Because in their mind, since the liberal ideology after World War II was the prevailing ideology, there was no lesson for them to learn in their eyes. Even though like plenty of socialist academics were combing through the pre-war history of Germany and learning about the kind of failures of liberal systems and the sort of frustrations that led to Nazism being able to construct a mass movement in the first place, and also the failures of the left at the time. That wasn't reflected at all in the halls of power in any major Western country after the fact. In fact, if anything, it was like the opposite of a lesson learned. Because of stuff like Operation Paperclip, the liberals were all too happy to sort of mythologize the evil of the Nazis as something unique and non-banal, and incorporate Nazis into their own governments and administrations. A lot of the politicians and a lot of the post-war liberals were sort of in the business of like recruiting scientists from Nazi Germany as well, and giving Nazi war criminals safe haven in exchange for political cooperation and such. We all know the meme about Nazis fleeing to Argentina, but the God's honest truth is that every Western country did that. Every Western country took in Nazi war criminals that really should have been tried and condemned and hanged at The Hague, because they were, I don't know, they were competing with the Soviet Union in the space race or whatever. In defeating Nazism on the field of battle, they failed to understand how it could have risen to that point in the first place. Because it was the Second World War was an incredibly convenient way for liberals and some socialists even to externalize the problem of fascism and Nazism to something foreign and something to be only combated at the point of going to war with another country, right? It was a very convenient excuse to not look for the sort of root causes of a fascist movement that might arise at home, you know? Very long answer, but in short, no. I would not say that the Germans really learned anything from World War II. Oh, and of course, lest I leave out colonialism in all of this, I realize there's something that actually contributed to why liberals didn't learn this lesson. In addition to the fact that, like, Nazis didn't represent a meaningful economic or social challenge to liberalism as a set of like socioeconomic systems. It was also a big factor that a lot of countries in World War II still had colonial possessions. France and Britain, two of the biggest participants of the war on the Allied side, had colonial empires. And in fact, a lot of Nazi rhetoric, a lot of fascism even in general, as an ideology, is identical to the rhetoric and practice of nations engaging in colonial projects. They just, instead of doing that towards populations in different countries abroad, they turn it against ethnic minorities and minority populations at home. You know? There's a reason that there's sort of an academic turn of phrase that holds that fascism is just colonialism turned inwards. And a lot of those liberal countries benefited from colonialism. So they didn't want to really acknowledge fully the causes of fascism because they would have to re-examine their relationship with their colonial like subjects or their colonial territories. And to this day, most countries in the first world still have a quasi-colonial, or many people would describe as a neo-colonial relationship with a lot of the countries in Africa and Southeast Asia and wherever else that used to be colonies, just straight up. Would you say that the GDR was good? No, I would not say that. I would not say that either, because the GDR was a state in the Soviet bloc, and well, I have my critiques of the state as a set of institutions, regardless of whether it leans towards liberalism, fascism, or socialism. But additionally, the one of the biggest reasons I would say the GDR was not good is because it was very authoritarian and not the socialist state that it purported to be. The GDR was simply state capitalist. I'm sure people have heard this before, but I want to explain. I want people to understand what that means when it's coming from me, which is that, certainly you didn't have the liberal capitalist order of private business people owning factories, businesses, firms, and whatever, and people working under them for, like as wage slaves. But you had a very similar relationship where the state and the party, I guess the vanguard in the case of the Soviet Union, or maybe they called it the vanguard as well in other Warsaw Pact states, the party owned all of the enterprises. They were owned by the state, but it was still this undemocratic private model of ownership. The workers that worked at the businesses and factories did not own the businesses and factories at which they worked. There was no freedom of forming trade unions or associations of the workers to realize the workers' interests. There was still an oppositional relationship with the workers at the bottom. You simply had a different type of owner at the top, still driving capital investment in an international marketplace, but domestically in a more command economy sort of setting. That is state capitalism. Same shit as capitalism, but instead of a private non-state boss, you have a private state boss, like, you know, a boss that is a component part of the state bureaucracy, and you know, still undemocratically elected, can still, you know, just threaten your whole livelihood at the drop of a hat. But now they have the power of the state behind them. You know, more so than your average capitalist would in the West, anyways. You know. But with that, stream has come to an end. It's 2 hours. I've gone a couple minutes over. I think this was a good stream, despite the frame drops. Again, I will really have to figure that out. So I'm going to raid somebody. Find who's live right now. Azan. That's it, really. It was good. Well, thank you. I'm glad I was able to provide good experience for people. Big hugs. Oh, well, thank you. If you know, if I were there, I would give big hugs too. But I can't do that through the internet. You know, it's kind of hard. I'm gonna raid Hassan. Hassan Nabi. Yes. He's not going to notice, and I don't agree with everything Hassan says, but he's one of the few genuine political voices, and I agree with him on most things. So, you know, he brings great value to the space. And enjoy the Hasanabi broadcast.